The next session we're going to talk through is twofold, focused on the MYOB Advanced releases and some industry updates. During these sessions, we do also like to talk through some industry changes and compliance areas that are impacting us. Some of you might be aware of the taxable payments reporting system. There's been some changes around this recently over the last couple of years that we just want to bring to everybody's attention. The taxable payments reporting system is essentially a tax reporting obligation required within certain industries, where within certain industries you need to report payments made to contractors who provide services. Previously, this has only been applicable to the building and construction services industries, and it essentially requires the submission of a taxable payments annual report, which identifies those payments that have been made to contractors within the particular services area. There's a task force called the Black Economy Task Force, wonderful name for a government task force, that's prompted several extensions to this reporting system. The first extension to that we saw was made effective the 1st of July 2018, making a requirement for those industries to also, for the courier and cleaning industries to also report through the TPRS system. There's also been a further change within the road freight, security, investigation, surveillance and IT services industries, where they also need to report TPAR reporting. That change came into place on the 1st of July 2019. And the first TPAR report for those industries was due on the 28th of August 2020. Now, up until recently, that functionality hasn't been available within MYOB Advanced. As of MYOB Advanced 2020.4, TPAR reporting is fully supported. So if that's something that applies to you within your organisation, certainly just reach out to the support team if you'd like further assistance. Another change that we're seeing within the industry at the moment as well is this initiative around e-invoicing. You'll have seen potentially back in February 2019, an announcement by the Australian and New Zealand governments jointly on this e-invoicing initiative that's designed to essentially save significant dollars within industry. They estimate over 1.2 billion invoices are exchanged annually just within Australia alone, and a benefit of $28 billion in terms of savings in the associated manual labour costs if we can automate that process. Within Australia and New Zealand, we've actually seen the governments adopt the Pan-European Public Procurement Online, or the PPOL, interoperability framework for e-invoicing. PPOL is already being used across quite a number of countries in Europe, Asian and North American markets, and it's a good standard certainly to adopt because of the potential benefits that will bring in terms of global e-invoicing initiatives down the track. In terms of the Australian government, the Australian Tax Office has been established as the Australian People Authority, who are essentially the authority that are managing that framework, service provider, compliance, and those sorts of activities. And they're in the process of going into this enabling and adoption phase, and have already announced some service providers to drive this initiative. There was an interesting announcement back on the 8th of November last year, where the ATO announced that any Commonwealth government agency capable of receiving e-invoices would start paying those invoices up to $1 million in value within 5 days, or pay interest on any late payments. Certainly some significant initiatives from the Commonwealth government encouraging organisations to adopt e-invoicing sooner than later. We certainly see government as a particular focus for those initiatives. Any of our government departments that are clients, or any clients that are actually dealing with government departments, certainly we expect those to be leading the way in terms of adoption of e-invoicing. Within New Zealand, the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment has become their local people authority in overseeing their framework. And Wellington, there was actually an organisation who started using e-invoicing on the 19th of December 2019. So e-invoice transactions are already flowing across the industry. In terms of next steps, both Australia and New Zealand have already accredited several service providers to support clients. We are actually seeing e-invoicing service providers who provide 3 points of service. Essentially, they provide what we call access point, so access point into the PPOL network, service metadata publisher, and translation services. So you can think of translation services as being a little bit similar to EDI translation services provided by VANs, where they'll essentially translate documents from different ERP systems into that common PPOL e-invoicing format. We've actually seen those EDI VAN providers taking our front foot in providing early access e-invoicing support, and already starting to work with some of those EDI providers and supporting those initiatives. So if you do have a requirement around e-invoicing for something that you'd like to pursue further, certainly make a point of reaching out. We can support you with those discussions and identify some service providers that we have been working with. In terms of the MYOB Advanced releases, the what's new within those, I'm actually going to hand back to Kelly, who's going to walk us through some current MYOB releases.
Thank you, Stephen. So I'm just going to go through some of the highlights of the upgrades this year. So firstly, 2020.2, and that was in April and May of this year. It was mainly an update for advanced people. So there are enhancements to the pay adjustment process and improvements to terminations, as well as improvements to the employee self-service leave request workflow. So the major upgrade for the year was 2020.3. This was in July. This year, MYOB have split the major upgrade into two parts. So clients could opt out of the first one and receive the second major upgrade. So the 2020.3 included lots of little updates, and I'll just go through some of the key ones and draw your attention to them. So in finance, there's the application by line. This allows payments in AR and AP can be applied by the line level rather than part paying the bills or invoices. You can choose which lines to pay and leave the remaining ones for a separate payment. There were new approval workflows for AR invoices, credit memos and debit memos, where there previously weren't approval workflows. There is the use of control accounts. Now, I'm excited about this one. So for AP and AR, you can select a chart of account to be the control account. This means that you can't post to it in the GL. I love this, so I won't have clients ring me up asking why the GL is different from the subledger. With this feature turned on, you can't post in the GL, so it can't get out of balance with the subledger. There are also improvements to project budgets at detailed levels and new workflow engine for opportunities, cases and leads. There are lots of new features in these areas. There are enhancements to entitlement adjustments, improvements to payroll tax reporting, and at the platform level, the new user interface became compulsory with this version. So previously it was an opt-in, and with this version, the old user interface became redundant and everyone should be using the new user interface. I think you'll agree once you get used to it, it's a lot easier to find things using the search function, and you can add to it if you wish to add new options in the user interface. There were also improvements to pivot tables. You can add a pivot table to your dashboard to improve the visibility of your dashboard. In the usability, there's also predefined roles for financial positions. So with this upgrade, it came with a lot of standard roles. It didn't require customization as previously. So it was just a matter of working out who has which role and what access that gives you. There's also a simplified company branch selector in the top of the screen. Inventory, there's advanced picking workflows and support for matrix items. In orders, you can change the supplier in a purchase order without having to start all over again. And there are improvements to the prepayment enhancements for purchase orders. In field service, there are enhancements to the calendar board, mapping and location tracking, as well as manual discounting options. And in people, which we've already touched on. So I think that's all of the new improvements in 2020.3. And in the next version, which is coming in October, November this year, is 2020.4. So this is a minor release on top of the 2020.3. Although clients that have opted out of the first major release, this would be a major upgrade for them. The enhancements that this brings, one that Stephen's touched on, is the TPAR, the Taxable Payments Annual Report. In people, there are improvements to the payroll batch payment screen and to work cover in Australia and ACC in New Zealand. And there is a new franchise connector in this version as well. So for those of you who are on 2020.2, this upgrade will be happening in October and November this year, and you'll be shortly receiving details of a free sandbox that has been upgraded with your copy of your live version, so you can do testing to show yourself that it's all going to go smoothly with the new version. Thank you. I'll hand you back to Stephen now.
Fantastic, and thank you, Kelly. Another thing we like to do is discuss the Acumatica connection within these user groups. Of course, MYOB Advanced is essentially a localized version of the Acumatica platform, where they bring in significant regionalization changes, additional functionality, additional ISV integrations. But at the end of the day, it is the Acumatica platform that we're predominantly dependent upon. And of course, we can get a bit of a preview in terms of what's coming when we look at the Acumatica releases. To firstly talk through some Acumatica news, it's good to see that Acumatica within the US are getting significant feedback from some of the research groups in terms of the positioning of their solution. In 2020, they've been identified again as a leader by Nucleus Research as a usability leader. And it's been interesting to see the quote from Nucleus Research as they say that the race to the cloud has been reignited as the fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic has caused an abrupt and permanent spike in the demand for remote work. I think we're all certainly seeing the benefits of MYOB Advanced as a SaaS solution, being easily able to respond to your remote work requirements. IDC, another research group, have again identified Acumatica as a mid-market ERP leader and have confirmed the value that Acumatica are providing in that space. To talk through some release updates, we're actually coming up to the release of 2020 R2 on the Acumatica platform. In fact, tomorrow morning at 3 a.m. is the exciting release. So if any of you want to join me, you feel free to jump in on a webinar with Acumatica as they talk through that release. But it's going to be an exciting time as we see the benefits of this. We're kicking off this sort of virtual launch event, and we're seeing some significant improvements and new features with Acumatica 2020 R2 being available as a general available release around mid-September. In terms of what that means for the local market, typically we see about a 6-month delay between the Acumatica major releases and the MYOB Advanced releases. So we'd be expecting the 2020 R2 features to make its way into the MYOB Advanced product the first half of 2021. Of course, this is all going to be subject to change. There are localizations that MYOB makes on the platform. There may be features that they decide to include or exclude. So please take this with a degree of salt. But to give you a bit of an idea of some of the things that are coming. Firstly, within the finance section, some significant features around multi-company transactions between multi-companies. The ability to actually have AR transactions within one company generate related AP transactions in the other company automatically. Some significant changes in terms of leads, accounts, business account visibility across entities with centralized account management. Some changes around bank reconciliations, and a big improvement for those that are within finance teams, support for new deferred expense recognition to join the deferred income revenue recognition that we currently have. From a platform perspective, they're really making some significant investments around artificial intelligence and machine learning, and creating some document recognition features as well, which is quite exciting. And introducing a new concept of workflows, which is a bit of a change in terms of approach. But essentially, if you think of a document, for example, a sales order having different states, and we have workflows that transition between those states. And I'll draw an example on that in a few slides' time. Some changes around notification workflows to unify the way that those are managed across the system, and some significant changes around improving business events. From a usability perspective, they're adding the ability to automatically create AP bills from AP documents from vendor bills, a very useful recently visited records list, which I'll show you shortly, an integration for geolocation features with either Bing or Google Maps, and some changes around the generic inquiry functionality as well with enhanced query suggestions. Just to draw a bit of an example on this, This is the Acumatica 2020 R2 interface. You'll actually see a new button next to the search box, which is essentially a recently viewed records button. So you see here, we can actually identify specific record types that we want to look at. You can also favorite records. So it's just a way to look at transactions, documents that you've previously viewed, and easily reference them and go back to them in time. Quite a useful set of functionality, I imagine, for quite a number of us. In terms of the address lookup and enrichment features, essentially this is geolocation integration. Again, as I mentioned, either with Bing or Google Maps, the ability within a business account or any other account where there's an address detail to actually do a lookup, validate that address, and see it within a map. In terms of the new workflow engine, you'll see the sales order form here, where they've actually added those sort of workflow steps within the screen toolbar. So we actually see they sort of put on hold is no longer a checkbox. It's actually considered a document state. And you'll see that those are represented both in the actions menu, and we also see the state switch within the toolbar itself. We'll see this sort of change in terms of approach throughout the system, including areas such as leads and opportunities as well. Of course, another change that I mentioned, which will be an exciting one for the accountants amongst us, is the deferred expense recognition. Here's an example of a bill, and you can see the deferral codes, term start dates, term end dates, and the original deferral schedule identified at that line level. So we can have expense deferments in the same way that we do revenue deferments at the moment. Of course, from an inventory and order perspective, some significant enhancements as well. Improvements around the buyer experience, particularly with e-commerce integrations. Some changes around sort of bad debt and collections processes. And a very useful feature around three-way matching of purchase orders to receipts to bills to prevent overpayment, which I'll show you a screenshot of shortly. Within the field service area, there's been some significant changes as well. Most significant one to draw your attention to is the ability to enable appointments to span multiple days and to record both travel and break time on multi-day appointments. Here's an example of that validating bills against purchase orders. I'm in the process of entering in a bill here. You'll see that it's actually popped up with an alert down the bottom that by the time that I've actually added this additional bill, I'm actually going to be over my original purchase order amount. So we're comparing a unbilled amount of $45.80 outstanding on the purchase order to this transaction I'm entering for $48. So quite a useful feature for your accounts payable team.